This video is brought to you by Babbel. Fun fact, eating boogers might prevent cavities. So 1 second. And parrots are actually great toy makers and architects. Taking a bath with a toaster is a wonderful way to unwind. 1919 was only 20 years ago. Glue goes great on pizza, and you, yes you, should be eating 1 rock a day. Now before you tell me that everything I said was total gibberish, know that I found it all on Google. And friends, it seems like our most reliable source for information and knowledge is having some issues these days. The prolonged digital acid trip has been baffling, adorable, and concerning. As the internet erupted in outrage, Google stood by its new AI overview feature, claiming that users are satisfied and that crappy results only happen for uncommon queries. So even though Google ate approximately 100 pounds of dog crap over this, which according to its AI is 1 more pound than you're supposed to eat a day, it's unlikely to reverse course. Now, the company recently committed over $100 billion to its artificial intelligence program, dubbing this moment a new renaissance. And hey, if a dog can play in the NBA, I guess anything is possible. The abject suckiness of this feature raises a lot of questions. Namely, is Google like broken? And if so, what does that mean for the future of the internet? Is our main source of collective knowledge going to make us as dumb as those horrible tasting rocks? And most urgently, what if it already has? Before we get into it, I want to talk about this video sponsor, Babbel. Now, summer is basically here. For many of us, that means vacation. And what better way to get ready for your big backpacking trip across Europe than with Babbel? Now, I've been using Babbel to learn Danish. I used to read a little Danish in grad school, but it was like 19th century philosophy Danish. I thought it'd be, fun to be able to order coffees and say hi. And Babbel has been a really fun way to do it. It's a language learning app that's scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in 3 weeks. Now, all their lessons are designed by real language teachers, not algorithms. So you get to learn using real-world conversations. And to show you how easy and fun it is, here's me doing my lesson earlier today.
Hvordan går det?
Hvordan går det?
Hvordan går det?
Tak.
Tak. I should go get this one. Tak.
Tak. Det går fint.
Det går fint. Det går fint. Ooh.
Det går fint.
After just a short time with Babbel, I can use phrases like, "Hi, jeg her Michael. Hvor toilet?" Pretty soon I won't have to follow that with "Taler du engelsk?" So join me in learning a new language from Babbel, which is one of the top language learning apps in the world. Now, when you click on the link in the description, you're gonna get 60% off your subscription. So let me know in the comments what language you're gonna be learning from Babbel. Hopefully it's Danish, because then we can talk in our new secret code language. Again, just click the link in the description. You're gonna get 60% off your subscription. But for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, so as we all know, the modern search engine was invented by 14th century Majorcan philosopher Ramon Lull. Now, one day while writing an erotic song for his mistress, Lull had visions of Christ and left his family to become a missionary. If you've ever written an erotic song for your mistress, send it to us via email or leave the lyrics in the comments. Now, after buying an enslaved man to teach him Arabic, as one does, Lull traversed Northern Africa and Asia Minor, challenging Muslim scholars to public debates. But as scholar Ken Hillis recounts, Lull's medieval debate bro approach wasn't an effective conversion strategy. Shocking, just attacking people with debate doesn't change their minds. This is, whew. Fortunately, he had another divine vision, which inspired his thinking machine, the Ars Magna, a series of 3 spinning discs covered in geometric shapes and symbols that could produce 1,680 different combinations. Now, Lull claimed his invention could generate the true answer to any question, especially theological inquiries that Christians faced while trying to convert Muslims and Jews. The Ars Magna required technical engineering and interpretation to produce its answers, making its methodology mysterious to everyone except the person operating it. Sort of like an early iteration of big tech's ubiquitous black box algorithms. The algorithms that control our whole lives, but we don't get to know how they work or what they do, but they get to control everything. It's really cool. Lull tried to use it as proof that Christianity was backed by logic, only to be stoned by an angry crowd in Algeria, fed up with his unsolicited preaching. If comparing the Ars Magna to Google feels like a bit of a stretch, know that according to Hillis, a number of computer science scholars claim Lull as their intellectual forebearer, and see his work as some of the earliest computer engineering. Now, whether or not you buy that, clearly the desire to make all human knowledge searchable is hardly new. Though Christ never visited Google's campus that we know of, the tech giant has since its inception in 1998 pursued a similar goal to Lull, namely to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful by using a machine that could respond to any conceivable human query in an objective, logical way. Now, the venture kicked off with the game-changing PageRank, which sorted search options by creating internet hierarchies based on hyperlinks. It functioned on the premise that if many high-quality websites linked to your website, you probably had a good thing going. Amazingly, in its early days, this now over $2 trillion behemoth tried and failed to convince companies, including Yahoo, to buy it for a measly $1 million. Now, the problem was, since the search engine's entire purpose was to send users to other sites, which it was very effective at doing, it wasn't Silicon Valley's favorite adjective, sticky. One potential buyer even told them it should only be about 80% as good. Google's become unimaginably more powerful since, largely by collecting infinitesimal reams of user information, which it then uses to constantly refine its algorithm. But at the same time, Google has gradually compromised its product, most notably in its embrace of advertising, which its founders initially rejected, believing it would damage the user experience. By 2000, under intense pressure to monetize, Google launched AdWords to connect keywords to advertisements, which looked a lot like search results. Hugely profitable, advertising amounted for nearly 80% of Google's over $300 billion revenue by 2023. Along the way, the increasingly sophisticated SEO manipulation has consistently tricked Google into ranking subpar or even spam content as high value. But even before the AI debacle, there's been a growing consensus and even some data to prove that Google has fallen off. Now, some said it's simply been unable to keep up with the increasingly fast clip of spam, especially given the rise of AI-generated sludge. But in a recent episode of his podcast, Better Offline, Ed Zittrain argues that Google is more likely actively making the user experience worse, with the goal of increasing the time we spend on the site, thus boosting ad revenue, just like that prospective buyer suggested. But if Google was already falling down the shitter, then AI Overview suggests it may have finally reached the sewage plant. In another episode of Zittrain's podcast, SEO specialist Lily Ray describes how she and other industry insiders tested the AI Overview for months and reported its many flaws to Google. She adds that nobody in the community really believed the tech giant would release such a shoddy product. But it's here, and boy, is it eager to serve you weird, incomplete, or generally unhelpful information. So it feels like the centuries-long quest to create a machine that can answer all the world's questions has been not a raging success. But if Google has indeed failed to deliver on its starry-eyed pledge, it's worth asking, was its dream flawed from the get-go? And if so, what has been its effect on the world? Now, while Google's objectively gotten worse, it's never been a neutral purveyor of information because it's impossible to neutrally sort information in the first place. For example, the standard library Dewey Decimal System is imbued with remnants of historical racism, sexism, and homophobia. In other words, your dad's 3 favorite hobbies. So what kinds of biases has Google historically had? Well, let's consider PageRank, which creates what scholar Rosie Graham calls maps of authority as it objectively ranks a site's importance and value. But Graham notes that rather than reflecting the judgment of the searcher, this upholds existing power dynamics and influence. This, Graham writes, promotes the fiction that Google was giving people what they wanted, when instead they were solidifying old networks of control and authority and establishing themselves as the central broker. Now, for example, Google gives major weight to whitehouse.gov and favors sites that link to it or are linked from it. Shout out to anyone who remembers when whitehouse.com was a website. But what if you're researching, say, corruption within the White House? For starters, the first 3 results that you're going to get are fact sheets from the White House about America's fight against global corruption. It's sort of like asking Shaggy if he's cheating on you, right? Because he's just going to be like, it wasn't me. Picture this, both red-handed, banging on the bathroom floor, and Shaggy's just like, wasn't me. As you keep scrolling, you wouldn't necessarily want Google to prioritize websites that regularly link to or especially are linked from whitehouse.gov because you're looking for someone critiquing the government. Systems of sorting knowledge have to be based on inherent assumptions about the world, or what researcher Conrad Becker calls transient social fictions. For example, Lull's thinking machine was built on a transient social fiction of a supreme Christian God, and all of its answers were contingent on that foundational tenet. Now, Google is built on, among many other things, the transient social fiction that say the White House is the best source of true information about what's going on with America, or that the New York Times is our most accurate news outlet because it's the most prominent newspaper in the country. This all reflects what many studies have shown. Google prioritizes large and well-connected websites. It does the same with sites promoting commerce. As researcher Astrid Mager puts it, Google's algorithm favors established institutions and commercial concerns at the expense of countercultural or more critical voices. Mager notes that as Google expanded and ingested more data, these biases only became more stark, and its prioritization of SEO-optimized commercial sites and behemoth news organizations became more pronounced. When you add to that the ever-increasing load of sponsored links, you have to sift pretty far to find any non-establishment or non-commercial voices. As historian Siva Viadnathan argues, Google now prioritizes consumption over exploration, shopping over learning, and distracting over disturbing. Once known for expanding the web, Google has effectively gentrified it into a place for mainstream discourse and commerce. As antitrust lawyer Joshua G. Hazen puts it, the site has conducted itself in a manner that now threatens the openness and diversity of the same internet ecosystem that it once championed. But Google is a complicated thing, full of paradoxes. For example, even when it's clogging up its airwaves with Forbes articles sponsored by the pet insurance industry, it's always modified its algorithm based on user behavior, adapting to what it thinks users want. And this way, the search engine's primary role becomes, as Graham puts it, to interpret intentions. However, when Google prioritizes intentions over truth, the result can be disastrous. Back in 2016, journalist Carol Cadwalder found that the first result for "Did the Holocaust happen?" was 10 reasons why the Holocaust didn't happen. Google responded by saying, "We are saddened to see that hate organizations still exist." They then noted that the search result was based on its relevance to users rather than the search engine's editorial choices, essentially surrendering any accountability. That article no longer shows up first today, thank God, but the fact that it once did is astonishing. It reflects what scholar Renee Morrison observed. Google search, as a steward of knowledge, conflicts with Google's understanding of its role as a mirror reflecting users' interest. I feel like we could say this for almost every video these days, but it's almost the case that when every mechanism of humanity, from knowledge acquisition to food consumption to education to housing, is mediated by an economic system that's dehumanized and predicated on efficiency and profit alone, maybe bad stuff happens. Just clip that, and that's the gist of most things. Now, the fact that someone is asking, "Did the Holocaust happen?" likely suggested to Google's algorithm that this person was a potential Holocaust denier. So it delivered them what they wanted to see, rather than accurate information. Last year, researchers from Lund University similarly found that Google's reliance on source popularity meant that extreme right fringe sites were being placed in top positions in response to queries that employed far-right vernacular. It'd be like if you asked your librarian for a book to help you decide whether or not you were going to do a murder, and then they handed you "If I Did It." If you don't know that reference, it's because after O.J. Simpson, who's dead now, was acquitted for killing his wife and her wife's friend, he wrote a book called "If I Did It." Shouts to every young Gen Z person who's just learning who O.J. Simpson was. And another recent study determined that the interaction between Google's algorithm and user behavior in Sweden facilitates a feedback loop of ignorance about climate change, where users avoiding negative information about the topic then causes Google's algorithm to prioritize climate denialism. Now, Google loves to say that it's merely giving people what they want, but autocomplete complicates that. Because contrary to popular belief, it's not based on search volume, which is a huge relief for anyone who thought that every girl dad was actually Googling, "Is my daughter overweight?" In the past, Google has been cagey about how autocomplete works, vaguely attributing it to search popularity. Today, it claims it uses language, location, trending interest, and the user's past searches to generate its suggestions. Now, Graham argues that this opacity shifts the blame from troubling autocomplete results onto the users, rather than holding Google responsible for suggesting irresponsible search terms. And these prove that sometimes giving users what they think they want means feeding them hate. For example, in a study last year, journalist J.D. Shadell searched over 50 trans celebrities on Google and found that autocomplete consistently made transphobic suggestions, like adding "is a dude" or "as a guy" to follow the celebrity's name. Some suggestions more subtly reflect social biases, like how women's names are far more likely to generate suggestions like husband or children or married, even when that woman is a scientist without a public profile. And autocomplete can actively affect our opinions, given its proven high propensity for suggesting slanderous or misinformative prompts, like "Bill Gates is arrested." This is concerning because research has found that negative autocompletes were far more likely to be clicked than positive or neutral ones, and that autocomplete suggestions about political candidates can have a substantial impact on undecided voters. Now, Google actually turned off autocompletes for candidates in the upcoming US election, but their game of whack-a-mole doesn't discount the larger point. Google's algorithms make editorial choices that wield enormous power over our perceptions, which can have massive implications on public knowledge. Now, with AI Overview, it presents us with information as if it's absolute and objective, even when it's telling you to train 8 days a week to improve performance and recovery. I want to live that hustle life as much as the next guy, but there's only 7 days in a week. But you might be thinking, if we don't like this, we can just ignore the pesky snippet at the top of our search results and keep it moving. And sure, you can do that. But the reality is that for years, Google has trained us to trust its authority to the point where around 28% of people click the very first link they see. So we shouldn't blame people for expecting it to be trustworthy, especially for time-sensitive questions like how to treat a snake bite when you don't have the luxury for fact-checking on account of the venom flowing through your veins towards your heart. And somehow it's on us to unlearn the basic premise that's guided much of the internet's development, namely that Google is competent at organizing information. This assumption also contains a weird sort of circular logic, right? Because, we're saying that users should know enough to navigate Google on their own, but also Google is the place where most of us go for knowledge in the first place, So is Google gonna teach us knowledge that's better than the knowledge on Google? It just doesn't make sense. The search engine's purported mission to spread knowledge has mostly resulted in amplifying already loud voices, perpetuating commercial interest, and keeping users in often harmful feedback loops. But what does it mean when results stop being merely annoying and start being straight up wrong? That is, what are the implications of Google's deterioration for the internet and for knowledge in general? Well, the answer is pretty simple. At a time when truth and reality already feel elusive, Google's hallucinations make the search for objective knowledge substantially more difficult, and this has drastic social effects. In other words, we're in a new epistemological crisis. And if you think I'm being a little dramatic here, I am notoriously a drama queen, just hear me out this time, because we can't overstate just how bad AI Overview is, and how bonkers it is that Google, which has a market value higher than the GDP of most countries, just went ahead and debuted it anyway. Despite previously exercising caution about releasing new AI tech, Google must have acted with the knowledge that AI Overview wasn't going to improve user experience, and might even do precisely the opposite. But this also makes some sense given how Google has functioned over the years. Despite amassing ever more data and precision, it's consistently made choices that hurt user experience, like plastering its site with ads as an attempt to balance its yin of satisfying users with its yang of making bank. And it's done so all while knowing that its functional monopoly over search means users might be annoyed, but they'll come crawling back the next time they need to know what temperature to bake Brussels sprouts at. And just so you don't have to do that, it's 425 degrees. The way Google manufactured its monopoly over search, well, that's a topic for a whole other video, but for now, just know it involved things like buying hundreds of competitor companies, filing over 100,000 patents, and bribing Apple and just about every major cell phone provider with billions of dollars to maintain its chokehold over mobile search. As a result, everyone from teenagers to grad students to professors to medical and technical professionals to people just trying to do the Heimlich on a choking child are now turning to Google as a primary source of knowledge. And this shift has undermined traditional methods of acquiring knowledge, stuff like libraries and archives. And of course, at the same time, federal funding for libraries is at an all-time low. While we've generally become adept at navigating Google's eccentricities, a lot of us don't have the skill set for doing research without it. Maybe that's what's been most stunning about AI Overview. It reveals the power that Google has held over us for all those years that we've been rotely accepting whatever information it feeds us as its top suggestion, and then using that information to make important decisions about our jobs, our health, and how to raise our children. Like I Googled, would it be a good career choice to start working in ad-supported, algorithmic-based digital media? And I was like, definitely, you're gonna be good. And now I'm here. And now at our peak level of dependence, Google seems perfectly willing to actively serve us the wrong information, so long as it can monetize our eyeballs. Hell, even just now, when we were trying to figure out exactly how much of the global search engine market Google controls, their AI overview told us, as of January 2024, Google held a 91.47% share of the global search engine market. This is a slight decrease from 2023 when Google's share was 83.49%. Just in case you're not a math whiz, Google's advanced AI system just told me that 91% is a decrease from 83%. And this all matters because control over the dissemination of information is control over knowledge itself. Back in 2012, Vedanathan wrote, "Overwhelmingly, we now allow Google to determine what is important, relevant, and true on the web and in the world. We have surrendered control over the values, methods, processes that make sense of our information ecosystem." Research has shown that our growing reliance on access to information afforded to us by Google changes the way we remember, making us more likely to effectively store aspects of our memory online where we know we can always retrieve it. Shout out to everyone who can't go anywhere without Google Maps, because I drive to this place at least once a week, and every week I use Google Maps, and it's just like, that's stupid. For those of us who have stored information on Google, the fact that it now returns objectively false results is a pretty big problem, because the way knowledge is shared has profound implications. As Hillis writes, algorithms powering search have achieved sufficient technical power so as to be able to produce general statements of reality that then come to influence, some would say even determine, general reality itself. AI Overview saying that Barack Obama is a Muslim creates a reality where for many, that's simply true. To be clear, if it were true, there's nothing wrong with that. Why would that be bad? I don't think it'd be bad. I think it'd be cool. On top of that, Google's methods of sharing knowledge shape our collective memory of the past. And you have to assume that some of the 10% of the young Americans who either don't believe the Holocaust happened or are unsure had their views egged on by Google search. So what happens when search engines create their own realities? You have a crisis of public epistemology, where it's harder than ever to acquire functional knowledge than ever before, when aggressively conflicting narratives rage on about things as basic as the results of a presidential election. It's almost too on the nose that our post-truth world finally has a search engine that just straight up lies. But Google's chokehold over the search engine ecosystem means that unless you're pretty internet savvy, well, bud, you're just gonna have to deal with it. And make no mistake, Google compromising accuracy is going to overwhelmingly impact people who aren't particularly internet literate to begin with. People who especially need Google to work. In other words, some of our parents are about to get even weirder and dumber. Google has shown that it's perfectly happy to undermine its supposed commitment to organizing information. And it's done this, so far as we can tell, solely for the purpose of looking competitive in the AI space. This isn't some kind of aberration either. Across the tech industry, we see powerful companies demonstrate their willingness to compromise public good for the purposes of maximizing profits or looking impressive to investors or even just generating media hype. Just like we're all guinea pigs in Google's experiment with AI Overview, we're all, willingly or not, participating in the experiment of a man-child's self-driving cars simply by virtue of having to traverse the same roads. Similarly, we're all test subjects in the grand experiment of social media, which is concerning because, for example, Meta, according to one data scientist turned whistleblower, consistently chooses profit over safety. I, for one, am shocked. That's true whether it comes to exposing children to dangerous content or amplifying misinformation about politics. The abject lack of corporate responsibility demonstrated by big tech, from its invasive data collecting to avoiding taxes, is particularly concerning when you consider just how ill-equipped the US government seems to be at applying any amount of regulations to the industry. Unless you just so happen to be a Chinese company. The same government that banned lead in paint or declared the spontaneously combusting Ford Pinto unsafe seems to lack either the ability or the political will to rein in big tech. And so we're all living in a world where we're just one AI search result away from chowing down on pizza topped with glue and pebbles. Let me know what you think about that, Italians. But what do you guys think? Is Google fundamentally destroying our access to knowledge? And is this going to have serious downstream effects? Or do we simply need to put down our phones and go back to the library? Let us know what you think. Huge shout out to all of our patrons. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. If you want to join this lovely and beautiful group of people, there's a link in the description. It's a great way to support the channel directly. In return, you get videos early with no ads, a bunch of extra content, access to our Discord server, and knowing that we love you. We also love all of you for just hanging out, watching our videos, commenting, liking, subscribing. Please be sure to subscribe and like and set alerts and all that stuff. It helps us a lot. In the meantime, be careful when you're out there roaming around Google at night, okay? Just watch your back a little bit. And I'll see you next time.